Welcome to the Emotional and Mental Health Summit. My name is Dolores Andrew Gavin and I'm your host. I am the founder of The Mythic Fairy, a dedicated children's website for all things emotional health. I'm also the author of 2 children's books, an empowerment and assertive coach, a podcaster, blogger and mum. I have 2 reasons, I guess, for doing this summit and bringing it together. And firstly, it's to support the whole conversation that's already there around emotional and mental health. And secondly, I also want to bring tools to people to show them that, I suppose, firstly, that there are tools that we can use to help us, whether that be learning something like emotional freedom technique or helping ourselves to step into our power by finding our voice. There are lots of different tools I'll share on this summit from the speakers that will be speaking. And also, of course, you also will hear from people who have been on a journey themselves. So it's always good to know that we're not alone and that others have travelled the same path possibly as ourselves. I hope that you enjoy the summit. Thanks for being here.
Okay.
Welcome back to the Emotional and Mental Health Summit. Today I'm joined by Anne Brannick, who does a lot of work and helps people with their relationships, which I think is a wonderful tool to bring into the Emotional and Mental Health Summit, because really, I think relationships can test us a lot of the time. There goes my sign. Relationships can test us, and when we have tools and understand, I guess, the dynamics that can happen in relationships, we have a much better a better knowledge, I suppose, on how to deal best with anything that comes up for us and may cause us emotional and mental strain. So without further ado, Anne, you're very welcome.
Thank you, Dolores.
So it's great to have you here, and I'm just going to read out a little bit of your bio and we'll talk about the rest then, and we'll weave it along as we go along the conversation.
Sure.
So Anne, you're the outgoing chairperson of the Irish Association of Relationship Mentors. So go you. Then you're a fully accredited relationship mentor. And I think that's the reason why it's, as I say, it's great to have you on the summit. So can you talk to us about, I suppose, the biggest challenges that you find that people have to you when they come to you in your capacity as a relationship mentor?
Sure, Dolores. The challenges that people come to me with are the ones that I experienced myself before I started this work. And at that time, I was struggling very much with parenting, and I had done a lot of mindfulness and martial arts training and health and well-being training. But what I hadn't done was look at my relationship with myself. And I happened to read a book by Dr. Tony Humphreys called Myself, My Partner. And I called it for a long time, My Partner, Myself. And therein lay the challenge for me, was that I put other people first before I would think of myself. And this is often the challenge for parents, because if you have been putting other people first in your work life, and then you come into a partnership or whatever and have children, or even single parents, blended families, all of that, and you've learned as a child that my way to be seen in the world is to put mommy and daddy first and all the family, and then the teachers, and I do very well at school, and I manage to produce the behaviors that everybody likes, except that I don't know how to look after me.
So it's all very learned then really they're learned behaviours, it sounds like you're saying. How we perceive, I suppose, the dynamic even around us is in a relationship, because I think a lot of times children perceive things which may not be even the truth. You know, they may perceive mom to be one way and dad to be another way, which is their perception of a reality. And siblings, I think, when we talk to our siblings, we can see at times that we all have a different perception of life when we were young.
That's right, because each child has a different relationship with each parent. And so each child, when you talk to them, it sounds like they came from several different families.
Yeah.
Yes, that's it. And each child's experience is different. So that kind of what we would call a protector that the child creates of getting it right for everybody is unconsciously created by the child. It's not created by the parents. And unless the parents pick up on it, and parents often do, because they'll notice, they'll say, my God, my child is trying to get everything right, or they're being perfectionistic about things. Children who create behaviors where they act out and maybe create a lot of tantrums or hitting, shouting, that kind of thing, fighting with siblings, their behavior is more likely to be seen by the parents, and the parents come to seek help over that kind of, how do we deal with this? Yeah. So that's the developing relationship with self with children. So those behaviors will be seen, but the kind of behavior I was talking about, you can go through life until you come to being a parent. I was very competent in looking after other people, but I wasn't able to easily factor myself in there because I wasn't aware of my own needs. And that's where I work with everybody, parents and individuals without children, and that are seeking to understand themselves and understand that they too have needs and how they're hidden.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So when someone comes to you, they may come to you with the relationship for their child, but you concentrate on them first. Is that right? And sometimes maybe they mightn't even realize what's manifesting for them.
No, because they will come about the child, and if we have a look at how they are relating with themselves in the situation, they can also help what's happening with the child. Because the way it can be is that they are not clear on their own boundary. People think I must change my child's behavior, which is exactly why I got into this work. And I found that it was my own behavior I needed to understand. And when I understood my own behavior and that I had unconscious unmet needs, I was able to put a boundary around me and say, I need, instead of, you're not giving me this.
I love that. I think boundaries is we could talk about boundaries for the whole rest of the conversation. So fantastic. Yeah. And is that one of the main things, the main challenges you find people have when they come to you, is that their lack of boundaries with themselves?
Yes. You see, people, because we all grew up as children, we can create a protective defense in that you should get it right for me, or else I should get it right for you. And these two people will tend to meet in a marriage. And so, because they're opposite defenses, and they can stay together for a long time and indeed can learn from each other. But they come to me necessarily when crisis happens, where they find conflict, continuous conflict, and that they're not finding the way they're communicating is getting their message across to each other. They don't understand each other. But when I get them to focus on themselves, each person on themselves, and talk about what's actually happening for them in the communication, that's where they get to see how they're communicating and what they might actually need.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's usually crisis that brings people into challenge. And then if it's parents that come, at the moment I have 5 young men on a course, which is extraordinary, and it's new. That they would be 18 to 22, and they are interested in this stuff. So things are changing where people are understanding who they are and how they are in relationship, and understanding that how we are will hugely influence how we are with other people.
That's phenomenal. Wow, and I'm so delighted to hear that, because especially in my conversation last night with Jocelyn Cunningham, I was speaking about, we were talking about how, or I think I don't know who I was chatting about, but like women are supposed to be this way. Actually, it was Joseph Maguire, and men are perceived, we have to be this way. But really,
yes.
And the men are often, you don't show your feelings, you don't cry or whatever. And this is actually then something that really hinders men, because if they don't feel as though they're allowed to show their feelings, I mean, it's a huge part of themselves that's shut down. So I'm delighted to hear that you're actually, working with this group, which are it's a great age as well, I think. Well, any age is great to start, but like 18 to 22, phenomenal. Well done, you.
They're so wise. They're so wise in that they recognize straight away this kind of material. And they recognize where they have had to suppress how they feel about things. And as you say, when we're raising children, women will often say men are this, but we raise boys. 80% of the parenting is done by women. It's changing, but it's not changing hugely fast. And the mental load of the household is carried by women. It's changing as well. And these guys are testimony to that. But young boys have a lot of emotion. They need the same cuddles and care that girls would need. They need to be able to have the tantrum and have the holding from the parent. But exactly as you said, Dolores, what happens is that it gets to a stage where maybe the dad who was told big boys don't cry is now saying big boys don't cry, and maybe the mother is saying big boys don't cry. And the understanding is that it's a tough world out there and you need to toughen up because you're going to have to take that workload. But in fact, that's blocking the flow of the river of life energy in itself. What we really need to do is express it and say, even if you get upset and even if you cry, we can be here and listen to it, and we know that you will find your own solution to it if we allow you to cry and listen to what you have to say.
Mm.
Even if you're a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old, and you need to cry. I was watching this morning, I tried to post something, but it got lost somewhere. But anyway, I was watching this. There were 5, Prince William in England and 5 top footballers met 5 of the fans, and they were talking about mental health and that.
Oh.
Yes, and how it was absolutely not allowed for men to cry. And you can imagine those big games and the big pressures, and often on social media, men are pressurized into, they can say anything they want about a player.
Yeah.
You know? Yes, and the player is a person, and the player has his own life, and the player, if he has been told as a child, you need to get it right for me, or the way you will be seen in life is through sport, they're going to get very, very hurt.
Yeah, wow, that's a huge topic. Fair play to you for bringing that up. Yeah, because it's true. I see it as well with my own kids, my own boys,
That's
on
exactly.
teams and that, and the peer pressure, and yeah, it's a great one, and it's phenomenal. As I say, my second time saying it, but I just think it's great that the boys are doing this, because I'm a real advocate for both boys and girls, but also really push the fact that boys need help too. You know.
Yes, they do. Absolutely, and the suppression of boys' emotion. When boys then get into intimate relationships, they're not able to feel what they weren't allowed to feel. And this will often lead to divorce. It'll lead to crisis, it'll lead to conflict. Because, in relationship with women, or any kind of couple relationship, what's needed is the expression and the felt expression of emotion. And the felt expression of emotion is where we connect. Where I am allowed to say what I need to say about how I feel, and that the other person is able to receive how I feel without personalizing it. And that is a big ask, because generally in families, behavior is personalized.
Tell us a bit more about that felt connection. I like that. Can you expand a little bit on that? Because I think that's, I didn't grasp it the first time that you said it. And if you could just maybe broaden it a little bit and maybe give us an example how that could work within a relationship, if anyone's listening to this and feels that they could do well with maybe looking at this area and working a little bit on it.
Okay. So my felt experience is about how I feel about anything that's happening with me. Yeah. If I feel that I have to suppress that, for instance, if I'm feeling, let's say if you take a small child who's feeling angry and an adult snaps at them and they start to cry, and then they get the message, big boys don't cry. Firstly, they're being told that their anger is not good, when actually their anger is their felt experience and is a communication to them that they need something. They're not, a young child may get overwhelmed with their anger because they're not able to self-regulate without the adult. If the adult snaps at that, they definitely can't self-regulate, and they will either escalate into aggression or maybe cry, which is a suppression of the emotion. Yeah, but crying is some expression of it. What they need us to do is help them make sense of that felt experience. So when a child is angry, I need to be able to say, oh, you're angry. Tell me about it. What's happening? Now, depending on the age of the child, if they're an older child, they'll be able to tell you. We need not to run in there and try and fix it for them, because they have the capability to come to resolution themselves. We need to sit with the feeling and allow them to say, well, I was angry and my friend did this and my teacher did that. And not to say, well, your teacher was thinking this and your friend was thinking that. No, that's fixing. We need to stay away from fixing and just be able to sit with the child and go, oh, that's hard for you. And they themselves will come, once they're allowed to talk it out, you are allowing the flow of life energy and communication. And so the child themselves may well come to resolution. But if they don't, you can say, what would you like me to do about it? Is there any way I can support? So you're not giving them the answer. We're continuously telling people what to do, and it really doesn't work for them. They need to be able to find their own way in the world, and it's our job as adults to support children and young people to find their own way, not to impose our way on them.
Love that, because when we do,
I'm telling you,
we're putting our backstory on it, and we're bringing our limiting beliefs and our suppressed felt emotions and giving it to them and confusing them all together, I can only imagine.
well, we're blocking the flow. Really, it's as simple as that. If you think about a river, if you put a dam on it, the dam will grow and grow and grow, but eventually it will burst. And it may not burst for decades later. It's later in life that adults will come. I'm not able to feel anything. My wife is saying this about me. My husband's saying that about me. And, I'm finding myself getting, and actually it would be generally that the other person is wrong. But bringing it into the I message and the felt experience of it, how did you feel when that was happening? For you when that was happening? And the person will often say she or they or he, and find it difficult to say what was happening for them because it wasn't supported when they were a child. But in support with a relationship mentor, they will find that the mentor is able to hold that and provide what wasn't provided. So you are never stuck with how it was. You can always move. And so if the mentor is listening in what we call unconditional regard, they will hear everything that the person is saying as being about them and the unexpressed felt experience that they have. Wow. And we'll be able to help them explore it. Yeah.
Phenomenal. And it's that holding space almost, isn't it? And it's that listening rather than being reactive and stopping. And almost a little bit of, no, that's not mindfulness really, but I suppose it's being mindful of of how we're present with people.
That's right. Dolores, there's an element of mindfulness in it. And we've decided to put together a retreat in Newry for people.
Wonderful.
In Drummondtime. And I'm going to handle the self-expression part and the felt experience. And my friend Kieran Kaur, what a name, Kaur, is going to handle the mindfulness and the core of mindfulness in that as well. So we're bringing it together so people get a chance to work with both, because mindfulness can often give you the gap if you can focus on your breathing. But for me, and with young child, I wasn't able to sit in mindfulness when I was parenting, because the anger that came up in me that had been suppressed needed to be expressed. So I actually needed the approach that I then took with Tony Humphreys. And so in my training, I did 4 years training with Tony because it was so amazingly transformative. And I found myself transforming and being able to know what was about me and what was about the other person. And so I stopped becoming enmeshed in relationships.
Yeah, I can imagine how transformational that could be. And also, I suppose it really helps with building resilience with children, doesn't it? I can imagine, if you're able to feel your emotion and work with it and work through it and allow it flow, allow the energy flow, then next time it happens, you probably are creating some sort of a new neural pathway, or maybe not, but you're creating a new story, and that your reaction will be different and you can bounce back maybe a little bit easier next time.
Yes, and what you're bringing up there, Dolores, is fundamental to our work, is that self as creator. So yes, you're creating neural pathways. You're becoming more conscious of who you are. You help a child become conscious of how they are in relating, so that they're not. For instance, I saw my niece one time. She fell over in the garden. I was watching out the window. There was nobody near her, and she turned around and went, "Who did that?" And so you can see how the mind can work. And she looks around, and so she can see, well, there's nobody nearby. So it's the idea that somebody else did it, you see. And so we can be like that. Immediately when we experience an uncomfortable emotion for ourselves, we can immediately think somebody else is to blame, unless we are, unless we're educated and held in a way that we understand that feelings that come up within us are a message for us. And we need to turn towards that and see, what do I need to say and how can I ask for what I need instead of blaming somebody else. And that's what takes the conflict out of relationships.
That's phenomenal. I mean, taking conflict out of relationships, all of our relationships, is so good for our own emotional and mental health as well, which is what the summit is about. So I think that's great, because as I mentioned, our relationships, and I think our relationships really, especially our closest ones, they act like a mirror for anything, for our shadows, something that's repressed in us. A relationship will shine a light on that.
Yes. And the danger can be that we go into personalizing it and saying, well, you didn't do this and you didn't do that, and you're never here for me. When really I need to be able to bring that back into an I message and be able to let somebody know, I would like you to be here for me at times. Okay. But when we give the message and deliver a message, you were never here for me, we're making the other person responsible for our needs. We're not showing the vulnerability of what we actually need. We're not making a request for what we actually need. And so that is how clever we are as humans. Because the threats to our well-being have been so many, we unconsciously blame the other person. But as we become conscious of it, we can go, hold on, how can I ask here for what I need? I can feel these surging feelings. Now, it takes time to get to observe and get a grip on what's coming up, particularly when it's strong. And there's nothing better than spouse and children to bring that up in you. So we're really trying to cultivate that way of examining what's happening for us and then being able to express it or ask for it.
That's great. And I often think it's funny how now this is a little bit trivial, but like how women sometimes, you might hear someone saying, well, I wanted him to buy me that, and you'd think that he'd know that I wanted it. I've had so many hints, and now I'm sure it happens as well. But it's funny where, if that's the kind of like the goal around without saying, actually, what I would like is this, and being very assertive rather than going around corners and expecting people to know what it is we want.
And again, that can come through the culture of the family of origin, that somebody should know what I need and want. The only person who knows what I need and want is me, and often I don't know. And so thinking the other person should know is actually putting them in a parenting position to you, because it's parents who generally can observe and see what might be going on for children. And it shows an interruption to my own development as a parent, in that I'm expecting another adult to know what I'm thinking and wanting without me saying what I need and want. It also highlights that I may not have been able to express what I needed and wanted as a child. And so there's a lot of compassion in this work and non-judgment, not to judge ourselves, because we need to meet ourselves where we are. If I'm doing that, it's not, oh my God, I've been getting this wrong for years. I needed to do it that way because that's how I understood it. And we must be very sure to bring this point across to people, that where you are is where you need to be. And you can move from there, if you want to. So,
great.
That's a very good example. You see, it's not trivial at all. And that's how clever we are. We think what we say is trivial, but it's not. It's always coming from our wisdom, always. How wise you are, Dolores. Think of it.
I think it's funny just around, I suppose, Valentine's Day, and you hear that, and just, don't you know that he doesn't know? He knows I wouldn't waste money on flowers. And actually, to be quite honest, if somebody handed me a bunch of roses, I'd be delighted. It's funny how that I don't know what this, and a lot of it can be societal as well, and not even our own story. Sometimes we just maybe might think we shouldn't be this way. And there again, another thing I just wanted to mention to you is, again, I do a lot of work with the emotions, and like that too. It's about, I work like very, very much like what you said. Take where you are with where you are, because if you start judging yourself for what you've done in the past, you did what you did from where you were right then. If you start judging, then you're adding a layer of guilt and a layer of shame onto it, and that's only making you stuck in other ways.
Well, again, we would see the wisdom of that if you do judge yourself and there is shame on it, we would bring the compassion to it and say, well, how are you judged? And what was shaming like for you? And then if the person is able to access some of their story and make sense of it, because one of our core messages is that all behavior makes sense and all behavior is a communication. So when we make sense of that behavior, we all change it, and we start to have more compassion for ourselves and not to judge ourselves. But we would turn towards that judgment, not to just see it as us being stuck. Being stuck is okay. Being stuck is, again, where we need to be. And so if I'm stuck in the head, then I maybe meet a mentor or someone like yourself who's going to hold it for a bit and say, well, what's happening for you when that happens? Yeah. So we will use maybe a few questions to help a person find out who it happens with, what happens, when does it happen, where does it happen, and how come it's happening. Okay. And that helps to explore the felt experience around being judged and how come you judge yourself, and what was the culture of judgment like in your family of origin, schools, or with other adults that you're around.
Wow, fascinating, Anne. That's phenomenal. I love that. I love that whole talk about felt emotion. I think it's great. It's a great place to start. So another thing I'd like to ask you about is how do you find anxiety fits into the work that you do? Because I spoke about at length about with Jocelyn Cunningham about anxiety and panic attacks and all the different things that can lead to that. So anxiety in relation to your work.
Anxiety, we see that anxiety is always fear of being yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And there are unconscious emotional blocks to your self-expression, to you expressing your felt experience. There's fear around you being yourself, basically. So I would have given talks this year on anxiety in children and adults, and seeing anxiety as a communication that can be made sense of. We also need to notice the things of who it's happening with, where it's happening, when it's happening, how long has it been going on for. And when a child says to me, I have anxiety, I want to know in that moment, well, what is it that you're feeling anxious about right now? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so I had an experience of this on a school trip, and the child said to me, I have anxiety, was possibly diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. If I do that, we stay away from those definitions and go with the psychosocial understanding that he around him to find that answer. So again, it's noticing what works for them, and also when they're able to outline whatever the fears are, how do they feel that the adult can support? And if they don't know, the adult can make a suggestion without trying to fix. Do you feel you might be able to do this? Take a little step. But it's also very, very important, our belief in the child or the adult, our belief that they have the capacity to find their own answers with support. When you're suffering with anxiety, you would need professional support.
That's great. So you work with individuals, you work with parents, and do you work with people in the workplace?
Yes, I do. I work this model. We take it into the workplace as well, and say working maybe first with the manager on a one-to-one basis, and then working with staff, so that the manager is already on board, because there's a whole communication modules to this open communication, understanding an I message and a you message. For instance, all you messages hold a certain kind of threat. They can be threatening to the receiver, whereas an I message doesn't place any kind of burden on the receiver.
Absolutely, because I know Mary Finn from Connect for Work, she spoke about the work she does about being the bridgeway when people are out from work for a long time. And I think that's great, because it's the same sort of thing. It's trying to have everybody on the same page, rather than the manager with his limiting beliefs and his, story. Maybe he's getting a lot of grief at home about something, and then you have an employee with their expectations, and this collision almost, unless there's open communication and everyone's knowing where everyone stands and everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet. So I think in the workplace, it can only, all of these types of tools we have can only lead to better working conditions for everyone, really, and staff retention.
Yes, it's also like a person, our deepest need is to belong.
Yeah.
And if you're spending a huge amount of your time in the workplace, you need to know that you belong to yourself and that you're acknowledged for your belonging within the workplace. If you're being put down and if you're being overlooked, and you're not able to express what's going on for you, that can implode on the body and you become sick, as you say, then you'll be off work, you see, and there'll be absenteeism. Whereas if the manager is taking a view to developing open communication, it takes time to be able to bring what's unconscious to consciousness and to bring in conscious communication, which will be open communication. It takes time like I'm 10 years, 12 years now in this field. And I would still find I could come up with unconscious communication, but more and more I continue to find myself using very conscious and open communication. So a manager in a workplace would need to be leading this and would need to be getting ongoing support, possibly having a mentor in the workplace, working with them and getting that ongoing support where when they come up against conflict and find themselves unable to resolve it, that it's brought to a place where it can be aired and resolved.
Love
and
it.
when, yeah. So there's that in it. It is an ongoing process. It's not like you can do a 10-week course. Generally what happens for me is people will do 10-week courses and then they'll come on one-to-one around their personal issues, and or they may come to a talk and then come one-to-one to kind of bring in this kind of communication for them within their family or in the workplace. So it's not an overnight happening. And to be honest with it, it's you can't just change your communication, because what's unconscious for you will drive it. So we need to bring to consciousness, what are the needs that weren't met? How can I meet them now? It doesn't mean you have to remember, because often people can't remember things to do with their child. They can have great blanks around childhood, you know, for whatever reason. But it's an ongoing process, yeah.
That's great. So that's wonderful, Anne. How do people contact you should they want to either go to the workshop you're doing in Newry or talk to you one-to-one? And also, do you do them via Skype or online?
I do. I work via Skype as well. I have a Facebook page at the moment. But my phone number, will I give you my phone number, Dolores?
Well, what I'll do is I'll put a link to your Facebook page. What is the name of your Facebook page, Anne?
Anne Brannick, parent/relationship mentoring.
Right. Well, I'll put a link to it. I probably have it done already anyway, up above or down below or over to the side.
Yes, I'm thinking the link to that is where I would put up the courses.
Great.
I will be putting up a website, but it's kind of worked word of mouth with me mostly. So all of that stuff I have to take care of yet.
Well, I'm not surprised because it's wonderful to talk to you. I love the conversation. I love this type of work, but I do think it's the way you make it very easy to understand. So I can see why it would be word of mouth for you and why you haven't needed to have a website to date, because, already I can imagine people will be like, oh my goodness, I need to talk to this lady. And also, I suppose the fact that you can do it over Skype makes it just open to anyone, anywhere, which is the beauty of working online.
Yes, no, it is very important. I am actually listed on the IARM website, the www.iarm.ie, which would outline all our courses in that.
Brilliant.
It's just the personal one. I haven't, it's just been, like you say, word of mouth. And I'm sure it's the same with most people, isn't it? And Facebook, I have to say, people have gotten in touch through Facebook around courses, and it's good to see that. And I find that's one of the pluses of social media, that it's
absolutely,
that people are sharing on Twitter and Facebook around, that it's expanding people's awareness that it's okay to talk about when you don't feel okay.
And that's exactly what I wanted to do with this summit, as well as supporting the conversation, but it was very much about giving people tools as well, which is why I think it's great that you've given us lots of tools there now, and even the vocabulary sometimes. But it's great, because whilst we can, we hear from different speakers and their vocabulary might just people will resonate with different speakers, and just help us verbalize what we might be feeling inside. And I think that's so important, and that's what I love about what you and all the other speakers have brought to the summit. It's the tools, it's the helping people verbalize what's inside them, because that's what matters most, what's inside us. And is there anything you'd like to leave us on? Anything that we haven't touched on that you want to make sure you mention, or anything?
Well, I suppose for people listening, and particularly parents, to remember that you have your own way, and that you can access your own way and be sure of yourself in your parenting and in your relating. That when other people, if you find yourself criticized by other people, to come into that solid place of getting to know yourself and finding and being okay with your own way, and that each other person has their own way. In that way, we support one another. And so we're looking at not being critical of each other, that we're doing our best to just support one another. That would be it.
I love that. Yeah, it's all about
Yeah.
support, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. Acknowledging that each person has their own way and have done or said something for a particular reason we may know nothing about. And so we need to be curious about each other's behaviour and self-expression.
Wonderful, Anne. Thank you so much. I'm so delighted that I've had you on here now today, and delighted to share the conversation far and wide. And I wish you all the best with your courses and that, and do stay in touch with us.
Thank you, Dolores, and thank you for having me on.
Not at all. It's a
really
pleasure.
Appreciate it.